Joel, invisible path number 3. How are you?
Patrick, doing good, man. How are you?
Really good. So this week, we're going to lay out the concept of brainwashing yourself, NLP, and The Secret.
And all sorts of other stuff too, I think.
Of
I think.
course.
Yeah, we are. You know, so I don't want people to think, that this whole Invisible Path series is just going to be about personal development stuff, and things like that. I think in the beginning we outlined kind of an interesting framework for where we might go. But I think what's important, the reason why I think we're hitting this first is because if you're paying attention, even in the slightest, you can see that things are kind of strange right now. And it's important for people to, build some resiliency in their life and do what they can to really build a strong foundation or add to their foundation if they're already in that building process.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we're hitting this first, is because if you're not paying attention, like if you haven't paid attention, here's the public service announcement. Things are a little nutty, and you should expect that they will continue to be nutty for a while. Don't expect 2021 to magically correct and things to go back to normal.
Yeah.
So,
get used to this as normal.
Yeah. So there's the preface, I guess, that it won't all be about this, but I think this is important to start with on this path.
I'm excited to talk about this concept for a remarkable amount of reasons. Number one, when we first kind of suggested it, I thought we'd have very different opinions on the idea. And the more I thought about it, like 5 minutes before we turned this on to press record, I kind of did a 180 and realized we're probably going to have a lot more alignment than I initially expected. So I'm excited about that. But before we jump into that, we have a couple of listener questions. Most of them are for you. So I'm you are on the spot here. I'm off the hook. All right. So first one, comes in and it says, Joel, I try to avoid it, but oftentimes I find myself falling into the trap of being a Yelp reviewer, quote unquote. What is the best way to quickly kill that inner Yelp reviewer?
That's hilarious. I love it. I love that meme has lodged in someone's mind. I mean, you can see that in the meme verse, the whole Karen meme, all this kind of flattening of people into cartoons. But the way to do that, I think, is first of all to just take a step back and look at what I do, and I see that I can't do it alone. Things are so hyper complex that my contribution to anything is quite small in many ways. Even the things that I'm the primary contributor to, it really takes a whole lot of people and a whole lot of help to do anything and to do anything well. So you go into a restaurant, let's say you get poor service there. Just think about the people there. You think about how just imagine the potential little tragedies and stresses and chaos that is in everyone's life. The person who's in the back cooking, they're sweating something that's going on at home with their kids, with money, whatever. And the server, maybe they give you bad service. They've got some stuff going on in their lives as well. I think about like road rage, people that are like consumed with some road rage. They have some real pain going on in their lives. So I think about it both from the fact that it's really hard to make anything. Like if I made a restaurant, it'd be just 1 stars at best, half stars. It'd be terrible. Like, so you think about how hard it is. Terrible. No, I think about even cooking at home. I'm making mac and cheese or something for one of my kids, and I get thrown shade because the cheese powder isn't mixed in perfectly. There's these little orange chunks. So it's like, take a step back and just think about how damn hard it is to do anything that's worth a 4 or 5 star review. And also, I try to think back maybe 100 years, 200 years in the past and think, my goodness, like now I can roll up, I can drive through somewhere and they can give me some amazing food in exchange for money. I didn't have to do anything for that. Life is so easy now compared to what it was before. I mean, obviously reviews can be helpful as well, right? You can get some good information, but having some empathy and having empathy for other people and how hard it is to build things, and having gratitude for just how fortunate we are for where we are in history, is an amazing thing. You didn't go to Starbucks and then catch the plague, right? So like, and you didn't have, you didn't have someone attack you. Things are very safe. Things are very good. So have some gratitude. And if you need to leave a constructive criticism, hey, fine. But try to squash that little gnawing ego in there. So, all right, that was a long-winded answer.
Yeah, it was a perfect answer. I do think that's an interest. I mean, so I'd never heard that brought up before. When you brought it up, it kind of sent a light bulb off in my head, and I really think that's a really great goal for humans, right? Let's kill the Yelp reviewer, and honestly, let's just get rid of Yelp, the company.
I don't know enough about it, but yeah, it's fascinating.
Well, this has been my opinion of Yelp from the get-go. It's like, if you want to offer a platform where people can leave reviews, how about tie in some type of credibility to have some type of identifying thing that ties you back to being a human being. So it's not Joe the spam bot leaving a review. It's such a simple thing too. Just let's do that, and then you can solve the problem.
Yeah. So there's this, I think I'd mentioned the 80-20 principle before, the Pareto principle. It's used in lots of different ways. One way it's used is that business owners know that 20% of their customers, generally, it's probably a smaller percentage than that, but basically a small percentage of their customers are going to be their largest pain in the ass. So 20% of their customers are going to be like 80% of the time that they consume on customer service and on putting out the fires for that. And so what you should do is take a step back and wonder, am I one of those people? Am I one of those obnoxious people? Have all the Yelp reviews that I've left, have they all been 1 or 2 star reviews? If so, maybe it's not all the places you visit that are bad. Maybe it's just your outlook. Yeah. It's kind of like the analogy of you stepped in dog crap. You have dog crap on your shoe. You don't know it. You're walking around and you're like, why does everything smell like dog crap everywhere I go? What is wrong with the world, right? Yeah. It's like, no, it's on your shoe. So get in there, pry that turd off of the bottom of your shoe. Pry it off of your soul, everybody. Yeah. It's hard work. I mean, but it's worth it. Yeah, if you just pay attention to that and just be aware and be like, oh, there it is. I'm being that 1-star reviewer again. It's a beautiful thing to bring that into awareness and then slowly adjust that over time, and go the opposite way. Like this actually leads right into the brainwashing yourself thing. An amazing thing to do is to compliment people out of the blue for no reason. The FedEx guy that was delivering a package, he had this glorious beard. I could never grow a beard that glorious. It's like, I like your beard, man. He was like, thanks. Brought a little bit of brightness into his day. Yeah. So, Darby does that every time she meets somebody, and it changes the interaction so remarkably. It's been really fun to watch that happen. It makes the day better for the person that you're communicating with, and then your whole interaction with them becomes positive and uplifting, and it doesn't have to be. Yeah. It's better than free. People say give a compliment because it's free. It's better than free because you get something amazing out of it. They get something amazing out of it. Yeah. And it forces you to see the world in a more positive light. And by doing that, you're just going to sort of subtly shift your mind to look for those good things instead of looking for the bad things. Oh, I asked for the salsa on the side. They put it on top of my burrito. 1-star review right now. Whatever. Right? Yeah. if you're putting yourself on the side, maybe you should 1-star review yourself. I don't know.
It's true.
Anyways,
Yeah.
all right.
Dig into that salsa. Okay, question number 2,
Yeah.
again for you. And I don't remember you saying this, so hopefully you did. Joel, in the first podcast, you said you feel you've gone back down Maslow's hierarchy after having kids.
Yeah.
In what ways did you see this manifest in your life, and why do you think that happened?
Oh, what an interesting question. So, yes, I did say that. I mentioned that briefly. So, when you're younger, like college age, 20s, late teens, it's a magical time. And the lower levels of the hierarchy are generally taken care of for you when you're younger. You got that support system of family, of the social structure, the college structure, all of that stuff. All those needs are met. You're not even thinking of it. You're so naive as to how the world, or at least I was. I'm so naive as to how things worked, and all that stuff was taken care of. So I could read all sorts of esoteric, Eastern mysticism, psychedelic texts, whatever, and go out into the woods and just stare at the moss on stumps and just have a flash of satori, right? Some flash of what I thought was real understanding, and it seemed like it was so much easier to get higher up on the hierarchy. And I see that with my younger son. Like, he does these meditations and stuff that he sees on YouTube, pineal gland activation, all that, and he comes out of his room after doing a meditation. He is so like high up there. And I think about how if I did a meditation right now, like when I do it, it's just like there's so much, and a lot of this is just my own wiring and my own, I guess, fault, right, for not being able to look at the world in a more positive or optimistic way all the time. But it's so easy to just focus on what needs to be done, focus on the lower levels of the hierarchy, focus on risks. Like, if you read anything, if you're paying attention to anything, you see all the risks in the world. And I'm trying to do the best I can to protect my family, mitigate against those risks, have more resiliency in life. And I'm not paying as much attention to those higher levels. And even when I do, I notice it is harder to get there. And so I think Jung, he talked about how part of the goal of self-actualization and moving up the hierarchy as an adult, a lot of that has to do with recapturing some of the wonder and some of the interests that you had in childhood and in young adulthood. And so that's some sort of alchemical process of taking that crap that you've been laden down with in midlife and transforming that into some kind of gold. Yeah. So at least for me, it seems real. The being smashed down the hierarchy, then being aware of that is a great thing, because you can work on trying to move up that again, instead of just being unconsciously cynical and leaving those terrible Yelp reviews.
So that answer actually carries really well into this next question. I think there's probably some overlap here. Patrick and Joel, listening to the podcast, I've been thinking a lot about yogis that live in caves or dirt bags, traveling climbers. Do you think these people have risen so high on Maslow's ladder pyramid that they no longer need or no longer feel attached to those lower tiers?
Do you want me to answer first?
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. We're gonna do an episode in the future about gurus, for sure. But because I think it's something interesting, I think there's a lot there. But it's hard to separate out. If you can do that, if that's your path and you've made it to that, that's an amazing thing. I would caution people just to be aware that what you're seeing, if you're looking at someone else that has the van life or whatever they're doing, mm-hmm. It's not all perfect as it's portrayed. That being said, I think like the people, like the insane free climbers, they have this massive goal of climbing, some really difficult whatever set path, El Capitan, right? And doing that without ropes or with ropes, whatever. People that are obsessed with this, it's almost like the path of a holy man or a madman in a way. To do that, it becomes a true obsession, and they are most definitely getting to some spaces where they have just they don't care about those lower levels, and that's an incredible thing if you can do that. One thing I've noticed is that people that get there, oftentimes people that are the gurus, oftentimes they don't have kids, which I think is interesting. But another thing is that sometimes it comes from some kind of earlier trauma in a way. You look at Wim Hof. He mentioned he's obsessed with cold, right? Cold therapy. He mentioned at the end of this Rogan podcast that he had some birth trauma. We'll get into this more in the guru episode, but this birth trauma that, like, to this day draws him to the cold. And you look at like a lot of people had childhood abuse, and then they transformed that pushed them in a way that made them excellent. And so people, the dirtbag climbers, sure, they've done it. Is that a worthy goal? Should that be something you aspire to? If you're drawn to it, sure. But if it doesn't fit with your temperament, and if you feel like there are more responsibilities you have in your life and you can't just escape in some it's terrible to say Peter Pan, but some people there is a Peter Pan thing there where it's like you don't want to grow up. For sure. And hell, maybe we shouldn't grow up. I don't know. It's, if you grow up, you'll regret it. And if you don't grow up, you'll also regret it. So that's a fascinating part of the human condition.
Yeah. My answer is yes, everything that Joel just said. I think that is a perfect summary. Okay, last question. I'll give this one. Patrick, in the first episode, you said something along the lines of, there are no incremental steps to infinity. How does that work with Maslow's hierarchy? So I think the infinity process happens at the ascension step. So you have to get those base levels covered. I think, even if you're a dirtbag living out of a van, you still have a van. So you needed the shelter for some reason. You still need food. It's just the reality. Even if you're not eating a lot of food, there is some calorie intake happening. There's some water intake happening. There's definitely respiratory action happening. So you have to cover those levels in a certain way. Even the most, I guess the most isolated humans, maybe not, but there's almost always human to human interaction within our life experience. It may happen somewhere, but it's definitely the exception to not interact with humans on a fairly regular basis, no matter how even remote you're living. So I think that bottom rung of all the way up to community is kind of just a part of the necessary ingredients of human existence. When we start talking about that infinity place, it comes after that. And so in a way, okay, there are incremental steps if you view those things as an incremental plane, but you could also view those things as kind of a pool of necessary ingredients for life. And then once you have the necessary ingredients for life, you can either stay right there or you can ascend. And I think that's how that hierarchy would work within my mind anyway.
Yeah. So the shortcut, right? I think that's what the question is hinting at here. It's what's the shortcut? And the shortcut, some of the gurus, they find the permanent change. They don't just have a flash of some kind of profound insight and then go back to the baseline, which I think is the best that most of us can hope for. But it's been a while since I paid attention to him or read his backstory, but I think it was Eckhart Tolle. I think he I think the way he got there was through profound depression. Like he was, I don't know if he was suicidal, but it's like the path to, and then something psychically broke, right? And he just had a complete and permanent shift, so that now he can talk in these strange circles, hypnotize people with this stuff. And you can tell he is on some other level, but the path to get there is not laid out, and you might not want to try to travel it. Because there's a lot of pain leading up to that, and it's an accident. It's something that you stumble into by grace alone. And if that hadn't happened to him, you would have never heard of him, and he's probably wouldn't be alive.
Yeah.
So
probably very true.
Yeah. So the big step up to the top, it's not up to you, probably, right?
Yeah.
Incremental is maybe the only thing we have control over.
Okay, so let's well, thanks. Number one, thank you. Send in more questions. Super fun to get that feedback and that opportunity to respond to things more specific and maybe in a little bit more depth. Because we do say a lot of we talk about a lot of things in a relatively compact amount of time. So if you want more depth on things, I think a question is a great way to do that. So let me ask the question to start off this week's episode in a real way. How do you brainwash yourself?
Good question, right? So the first episode, we talked about how the invisible path, you can look at it in one way as some stairs that get you above that maze, so you can look down on it. Then we talked in the second episode about achievement and why it's an important thing, and how it really can't be avoided for very long unless you want to be frustrated and eventually resentful. And so brainwashing yourself and that's just a clickbaity way to talk about this. It's really an essential thing. It's essential to understand that you have this inner dialogue going all the time, and you can control that. You can control that more than maybe you think is possible. And what originally got me interested in this, I think, is just that I was captured by the standard Gen X ethos of slackerism and of general negativity. I think the music of Gen X too is kind of lame. And so if you find yourself listening to Pink Floyd a lot, that's going to get into your head. That might be a problem for you. We'll get into that in a little bit, but language. So you should look at language in one way as technology. This is a technology that humans have created in a way because of this brain that we have. Speaking is an act of implanting ideas into someone else's mind, and your own mind as well. What you say impacts other people around you, and it also impacts yourself. And so being conscious of that is an important thing. One thing that I think is so interesting is when you ask someone how they're doing and they say, not bad. And I used to do that. And then when it was pointed out to me, I think it was I don't know, it was some podcast I listened to, and they talked about not bad. You just think about what the hell that means. That's awful. That's an awful response. You should say something that is at least positive. If you don't want to get into a long conversation, that's fine. But just say something that is at least positive. Not bad is terrible. And language creates almost everything in the human world. And this might be a strange concept for people, but when you think about science fiction novels, I don't really read them, but when you think about the impact they've had on technology, it's been profound. Like so first what has to happen is you have to be able to envision something before you can actually make that. And you have to be able to say it maybe and put it down on paper even. And so you look at like early science fiction, space travel, all this stuff that was essentially imagined by humans as possibilities before we had the technology to pull it off. But eventually the language and the ideas pull that pull that formality of actually occurring into existence with things that humans create, space travel, circuitry, the iPhone, all this stuff. It was imagined first before it was made. And maybe you're not going to make the next rocket ship with a language that you put together, but you can shift your language to make it more positive and more growth minded, so that you're going to have a better time in life. Maybe you're going to be able to make some better things out there. Yeah, because if you can't articulate it, it simply doesn't exist.
Yeah. So one of the, we can go right back to climbing on this, which I think is interesting. But it really, any physical skill set or any physical task, before something's done, it is marketably harder than after something's done. So when the 4-minute mile was thought of as impossible, no one could do it. And then somebody does the first 4-minute mile, and then people start doing 4-minute miles all the time, right? It's just like there's definitely something within the human psyche, which once you are sure and there's concrete evidence that something is possible, then it becomes significantly easier for humans to achieve those tasks. So there's something to this. So I don't know that I've ever really done a remarkably good job of explaining this thing to me, but you started off with this thing about inner dialogue. And I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but one thing that really has set me apart from a normal human citizen is that I have almost no inner dialogue at all. And when I do have inner dialogue, it is 99.999% forever remarkably positive. So I have this like really weird experience where when I get into these concepts, they're really exciting for me because I don't know how other brains work, and nobody knows how other brains work. But from having this conversation with people, most brains don't work in the way my brain works. And it has nothing to do with like, people always ask, like, what did you do to do that? I did nothing. This is just like how my brain was set up to operate, and it's how my brain operates. So, but I've like aligned this idea of NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming, right? Is that
neuro linguistic? Yep.
Okay. So I think that one of the interesting things about the concept of neuro linguistic programming, or taking into account that linguistic or information coming from language can have an impact on the way our brain works. It's almost an identical concept to karma, right? So, people think of karma as like, if you do something, then something else will happen. But that's not really what karma is in a yogic sense. Like karma in a yogic sense is like, this I guess would be the best way to explain it with an example, is like, if you committed a murder, and you did that act one time and you didn't think about it again, you would have significantly less karmic impact on your body than if you thought about committing a murder every single minute of every single day. Like there's the way that our you would certainly have a karmic impact from committing a murder, but the weight of the karmic impact would be weighed as greater if you thought about doing that every single moment of your life. So when I like reframed the idea of linguistics programming the brain, we're really talking about programming the brain, right? However the brain gets programmed, it's just language or incoming information is kind of the biggest input we have in how we program our brain. So getting into the concept, I guess taking a one step back from just language, it can be all encompassing if we just say, hey, information that comes into our brain impacts our thought process, and our thought process impacts the way we experience life.
Absolutely. That's fascinating. So I remember reading, just what's fascinating is your inner dialogue and how overwhelmingly positive it is, but also how you feel like it's very low down It's not very active, and it's a minority of people that have a sort of quiet inner dialogue. My inner dialogue's a demon. Oh, it's a real, the guy's a real prick. And you think about how like I would never say to someone else, even at 5% of the things that I'll say to myself, that I'll criticize myself with, right? And I think that there's plenty of people that have a negative inner dialogue, and the evidence for that is you just look at how many people Tony Robbins has for clients. How many people pay attention to that, right? He's like the most the popularizer. He's not the grandfather, but he's the popularizer of NLP. He's done more with that than a lot of people. And so you'd mentioned, the positive or negative things that you put in your mind. If you just go through the exercise of not listening to, pay attention to the music you listen to. Pink Floyd's a beautiful example. You could listen to the album Animals. It's a stunning album, sonically amazing, great stuff. Do you really listen to the lyrics? Do you really want to put that stuff in your head? And I say this as a person who's listened to it many times, and after a while, I just had to stop listening to really good but depressing music, because it just does not serve me. And that's a fascinating thing. And the one thing that I still can't quit is the doomer news. You pay attention to the news, that's a terrible thing. I have cut that down a lot. If you take those inputs out of your head, I mean, the news runs on fear. And there's an old saying, which is from the journalistic space, which is, if it bleeds, it leads, right? That's what they're going to put above the fold on the newspaper, or at the top of the page. They're going to put the negative stuff. And if you constantly put that in your head, that will impact your outlook on things. And you could say, well, I don't believe you, and I'm not going to try it. And the reason why I'm not going to try it is because I don't want to be uninformed. My God, you'll be informed. People will tell you about the news. You can just ignore the news, and it's going to come to you anyways. Just try it for a while and it'll come to you anyways. And you don't need to know any of it anyways, pretty much. It's fine. You'll get the big bites. You'll get the big chunks of it. It'll find its way to you, even if you ignore it. And your brain will be happier that you did that. And eventually you'll be able to lose that guilt of, but I'm an informed citizen, or now I'm an uninformed citizen because I ignored it. Aren't I bad for that? No, you're a good person, and I'll give you a virtual high five if you take a break from it and just see what that does to your mind. It's a fascinating thing. What else I want to say about that? So it's better to be an optimist and be wrong than it is to be a pessimist and be right. Just think about that. And you can have all sorts of excuses and frameworks for why things are bad, or why you can't make it work, but don't do that, because that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Can I tell you a hilarious example of this? Everyone in the audience. So I happened across this interview. This is not something that I usually consume, but it was an interview with a self-described incel. These are men who are involuntarily celibate. And the person on the interview, he has a YouTube channel about this, and a group and a forum all about this, where all of these guys get together and complain about how the game is stacked against them and they cannot find female companionship. And they point out, and possibly rightly so, that there are real demographic trends and technological changes with online dating that skew it so that the majority of the men are totally invisible in this game. And whether or not that is true, if the person who was putting all this effort into doing podcast interviews about how they're an incel, and putting together YouTube videos about being an incel, and making a forum about it, if they just focused on the positive thing instead of the negative thing, they would have this problem solved for themselves. And so it really has to do with outlook. And that sounds kind of, maybe to cynical people, that sounds overly simplistic. And as a cynical person myself, I have to battle against that. But putting the work into positive things is far more impactful and important in your life than, even if you're correct in your assessment that things are negative and wrong, and that's why you shouldn't do this, and that's why you should give up. That's a tragic self-fulfilling prophecy. And so try to avoid that.
Yeah. So I have an interesting experience on something you touched on, which is letting go of the news. So for about a year, kind of overlapping between 2018 and 2019, I completely ceased any interaction with incoming information. So I stopped listening to podcasts. I stopped reading the news, and I just experienced this really deeply profound state of pleasantness. And I know that it's there, but I also understand there's an addictive quality to taking in information, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I don't feel any guilt if I skip the news, but I do feel that little dopamine hit when I do take in the news, right? Like, I know, like, when I read something, it's like, bing, oh, you know
Yeah.
something, buddy. Look at you knowing things. So
Yeah.
there's an interesting pull towards these things that don't
Yeah.
necessarily serve our brain remarkably well. And really, when you think about storing information that is completely unnecessary, there's no like, hey, we're bombing some other country, right? It's like, I have no ability to impact that situation at all, and knowing that doesn't make me feel good, and not knowing that wouldn't make me feel bad. It just wouldn't. But knowing that can absolutely make me feel bad. So it's like you have to be willing to. And my news consumption from that year is down. It's probably 10% of what it was. And I still know if I got rid of that 10%, I would live a much more pleasant experience. But every 10 days or so, I'm like, well, let's read and just find out what's happening in this world. So I think that there's an interesting thing, is that once you have that kind of awareness of, oh, there's a dial that I can kind of turn up and down, the pleasantness of my life experience, then you can make choices like, is a dopamine hit good in this 7 a.m. moment? It's probably better than looking at your email, because you're probably going to find something that's really going to get you riled up in your email.
Yeah. I'll have this awareness before, like, I've had these moments, like, before I go on and look at my preferred source of news, and I'll think to myself, I'm about to look at this. Do I really want to do this right now? And I want that hit, and I want that vibration as well, of a little bit of outrage and a little bit of feeling like, yep, my tribe is right. Look at these fools. I'm so clever for seeing through the matrix when these other people don't. Right. And the whole thing is so beautifully, like, engineered against us. It is just a stunning thing. So yeah, you have to be careful definitely what you put in your head. This is what people figured out a long time ago. Like, one of the OGs of this space is Earl Nightingale. And so if people go to YouTube sometime, so, okay, this is a tragedy. If you're just listening to The Invisible Path for just entertainment and you don't do anything with it, that's bad. So just write down right now, Earl Nightingale, I think it's called The Strangest Thing, something like that, on YouTube. You'll find like a 30-minute video. And this guy really outlines so many things so well, but really what you focus on is what you will attract into your life. And when I first heard this, oh my gosh, like, the bullshit meters just went off so fast. It's like, no, this is not true. This is not true. This is just airy fairy. This is wishful thinking. And certainly you have to put in work. But you have to first focus on what it is that you want. If you're focusing on what you do not want, you're not going to get to what you want. You're going to get more of what you do not want. Um, I think about how much like attention, how much media attention, like a negative political candidate can get when everyone is focusing on how much they hate this candidate. Like everyone is psychically manifesting an attraction towards that candidate, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah.
It happens. If people that get into a car crash, if they see a tree and they're trying to avoid the tree, they're swerving off the road. Sometimes magically they will just be attracted to that tree when they're trying to control the car, because you're looking at that thing, you're trying not to hit that. You're not looking for the space in between the trees. You're looking at what you don't want to hit, and that is not good. You need to focus on what it is that you actually want and bring some positive emotion to bear on that as well. Brainwashing, if you really want to brainwash yourself, I mean, that is an intentional act. And so you can't just focus on, well, I want this thing. You have to focus on it, but then you actually have to bring positive emotion to it, and in a way. So if you have a goal and you want that goal, you need to actually take some time and think about how good you're going to feel. Close your eyes. Think about how good you're going to feel when you attain that goal. You want to embed that into your brain as a goal, because your brain is so incredible. It's a supercomputer, and if you give it the right goal, it's gonna look for patterns. It's gonna look for ways to solve that problem and get you to where you want to go.
Yeah.
When you look at pattern matching, I think about that with mushroom hunting. You go out in the woods, there's grass, there's ferns, there's stuff everywhere. And after you see that first mushroom for the kind that you want to get, let's say it's morels, they have a very strange kind of honeycomb looking appearance to them. If you haven't seen them before and you don't know what you're looking for, your brain can't match that pattern. But once you get one, you might look around and be like, oh, holy smokes, they're everywhere. I just couldn't see them. I just couldn't see them. So the brain will look for patterns. And so you have to give it the right patterns, give it the right goals.
And you really can train. I mean, that mushroom hunting example, I can do that. So when my brother and I were like, I don't know, 20 years old or so, we started this business of collecting golf balls. And we would just go out on golf courses and just walk the rough, and you would just find them. And we'd bring friends out and be like, go look for golf balls. And they'd find like 6 golf balls. And we're like, well, we have a garbage truck full of golf balls here. What's going on?
Yeah.
But it became your eye, which is obviously run by the cognitive abilities of your brain. It just starts to identify things differently. And that honeycomb shape of the morel, it's like, okay, boom, that now becomes the thing. And that thing just starts to stand out like a neon sign amongst all the other backdrops. And it's not that it is a neon sign, right? It's that you shifted your perception maybe 1%, right? But that 1% of perception shift makes a massive difference. And I think that more than anything else is what I think of when someone starts talking about brainwashing yourself, about putting ideas in your head or knowing what you want, right? Like knowing what you want. Mm-hmm. I think there are actually 2 pieces to that, because I think a lot of people are pretty good about knowing what they want, right? Like they have some vague idea, at least, of the things that they want in their life. The other thing, though, is like admitting what you want. And I tell this story. It's about an apple, and it's basically like, if you want the world's best apple, you should ask for the world's best apple. And if you're not willing to ask for the thing that you want, the likelihood that someone will provide you with the thing that you want, and that someone could include you, is remarkably small. It's like 1 in infinity that someone's just going to guess, okay, this person wanted the world's best apple. Well, here you go. And even if you don't get the world's best apple, right? Like, say you tell all your friends, hey, for my birthday, I want one thing. It's the world's best apple. The likelihood that you're going to get a bunch of really, really good apples is remarkably high. And like, cool. Like that is a win. It's way better than if you wanted the world's best apple and people bought you a bunch of shoes, because shoes are not going to fulfill that need of world's best apple in the way that a really, really good apple will. So it's like, one, admitting the thing that you want, especially if you want that thing from someone else. And I think that's the scary part, because the reality is that the other person may say, oh no, I'm not going to get you the world's best apple. I bought you a sack of rotten lemons, and that's what I'm giving you. And then you have to, like, if that's too much for you to take, then that could be the end of a relationship, right? And that's obviously a really simplistic example, but I think that one, just admitting the things that you want, being willing to admit that to yourself and to those around you, puts you on a different path. And it puts you on a path that's so significantly closer to the desired outcome that you want, that it's foolhardy not to do that. If you really want something, if it's like really, really impactful and important to your life, just admitting it alone will put you on such a different path than just aimlessly wandering through the desert, that it's only worth it. Even if you don't get it, it's only worth it.
Oh yes. You know, you said at the beginning of that awesome rant that people have generally a vague idea of what they want. That is 100% true. People actually don't know what they want. They will not take the time generally to get very specific about what it is they want. They might say, well, I want to be rich. I want to have financial independence. But they don't actually think about, well, how am I going to get there? There's this study that was done at some Ivy League school, graduating classes, and they asked them a whole series of questions. One of the questions was, do you have a goal for what it is you're going to do after you graduate? And do you have goals? And this I think was as specific as, do you have goals that you have actually written down? Right? They don't even teach you that as a skill set in school, not even in college. They're never going to do that. So they follow these people over decades. They find out 3 decades later, 4 decades later, whatever it is, that the 3%, there were only about 3% of the class that actually did that. Those 3% made more money than the other 97% of the class combined, right? And it's not about the money. The money is a proxy for delivering value and for doing something, you know, grand and worthy, or maybe unworthy. I don't know. Maybe they opened up a bunch of strip mining companies. I don't know what they did, but you know what I'm saying? They did something that was worthwhile. And so even if you're coming to this late in the game, because all of us are, because college and high school, they don't really actually want you to think about your goals. They'd like you to just fall into a track and follow that path, and then convince yourself that that was your goal. And maybe it was, but my God, you can have more goals. You can revise your goals. You can update them. And it's a very important thing. And then having the tools. So we talked about neuro-linguistic programming. I don't think we can't get into all the techniques of this, but a lot of this really comes down to positivity. It comes down to, if you're interested in this, you should just go out there and go onto eBay and get Tony Robbins' Personal Power 2. If you get it on cassette, you get bonus points from Joel and Patrick for doing that. It's sick. It's from the 90s. It has awesome 90s music. You'll love the cheesiness of it. But if you go through that tape or CD course, what you will get, or any other course, you'll get a real outline for what motivates people, both positively and negatively. And if you can use that intentionally to drive your goals, to say, this is what I want. I'm going to really sit down and do some kind of meditative exercise where I think about how good I'll feel when I'm on that path, when I'm getting to that goal, how good I will feel once I've arrived, and then how terrible I will feel if I've done nothing for the next year and the next 5 years, the next 10 years to move towards that goal, how much pain and regret and shame I will have.
Mm.
If you use both of those combined, that is Jedi level stuff that most people are not doing. And you can see the people who are doing that, or just intrinsically have those motivations. It's a stunning thing to look at those motivations. And another good thing is, for technique wise, is people run into problems. You have your goal. Let's say you've done this, you have your goal. You ran into problems. Obviously, you ran into problems because you're in a new territory and things are going to be 10 times harder than you think they are to get there. When you run into a problem, people have a terrible response to that. A really good thing to do is to ask, myself included with that, right? The dread comes in, the little demon in my brain comes in. A good thing to force yourself to do is to ask, what could be great about this problem? What could be awesome about this obstacle that I'm facing? And maybe it's just that you're a little bit less naive now and you learned and you can go forward. And those are hard-won lessons sometimes. But to ask the right questions and to frame things in a positive way is going to help you with that growth mindset instead of having just a fixed mindset that is going to result in you not moving forward.
And really, you all like 100% failure at trying something is like, you always learn, right? So if you 100% failed at trying to do something, the next time it's very unlikely you'll 100% fail. You made 99.9% fail, but the likelihood is you learned something from every failure that's presented to you. And I think that like in that intrinsic kind of component of people that are just doing and creating and constantly, there's a level of okayness and acceptance of the fact that you're going to fail at a lot of things that you try. And you're still going to, if you are willing to fail, you're going to put out 99% more any output than most of the people on the planet, because most people are really, really, really worried about failing. And the reality is we're all going to end up as dust, no matter how we try to live this life. The end outcome is the same. So you may as well go out and see what you're capable of, because why not?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. The people that fail the most are the most successful. Absolutely. Like especially if you're actually examining those failures and understanding how you're going to pivot the next time you run up against that particular obstacle. Right.
Yeah.
And I think about this positive mindset, and I try to impart this with my kids, and the language, back to the language as technology. I remember like a month or two ago, probably 2 months ago, I took my younger son into his school to hand in his de-enrollment paperwork, because we're homeschooling both our kids. And the administrator, she said to my younger son, she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. We hope to see you back here again." And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. So we're walking out of the building. I'm like, but actually before we walked out, I said, "Oh, don't feel sorry for us. Do not feel sorry for him. We have so many amazing things planned that we are going to be doing."
Yeah.
Right. And so teaching my son and myself to catch that unconscious negativity. And I get it. She has pride for the school that she works for. It makes total sense that she would say that. She believes that she has the best solution to our problem of education. Yeah. But she doesn't. I guarantee it. We're doing amazing things. And so to walk out of the school with him and to be like, "Hey, did you catch that, Noah? Did you catch what she said?" And I was, we're talking about how like she has no idea what we're going to be doing. And that's fine. She doesn't need to. Just no idea all the amazing things we have cooked up and in the background and things we've already been working on. And so to be able to do that for yourself and for others around you, to help brainwash the people around you that you care about and that are in your inner circle, is a great thing. You should aspire to be a a language and brainwashing ninja so that you can help those around you and subtly shift them. And it doesn't have to be like, hey, we're gonna, well, maybe it is. Maybe you are like, hey, we're gonna put in this Tony Robbins tape into your tape deck. If you sew a tape deck, you're awesome in your car, right? Put that in the tape deck, put the CD in, whatever. And we're gonna listen to this. But it could be more subtle than that. It could just be that that you just change and have more positive language around people, and you sort of shift things around for people when you're interacting with them, and that's a great thing. So it's everywhere. There's opportunities everywhere for this, and it really is the first step. I mean, we're going to talk later in a future episode about how to do things, and some of that is specific techniques and having the correct expectations for how hard it can be really to do things, but how that's okay. But the first step to doing things is 100% mental, and you have to have the right outlook, or you're never going to get there unless you are just lucky beyond belief. And if you are, good for you, and that's awesome. But for most of us, you're going to have to change just to like really juice up your positivity the most you can, and be aware of people around you that are unconsciously embedding negativity into your worldview.
So if I'm at home listening to this and I'm thinking, like, Joel, you're right. There are a lot of people who are responding to the question of how are you with not bad. Is your baseline, is your like bottom rung on the ladder awareness, or is there a reprogramming that would be the first and initial step that you'd look at as like, well, here's the thing that I would start with if I wanted to start playing with my neuro-linguistic patterns?
It's yes, I think we've talked about a lot of things. I think being aware of what media you are consuming, music, news, all of that is really important. We talked in the previous episode about the pitfalls of how social media skews what you're looking at, and you think that you're looking at just people that you think are killing it. They're higher up on the hierarchy than you, right? That is unconsciously not that great for you as well, to be looking at that stuff all the time. And so if you take that stuff out and you cultivate some personal agency and say, yes, I'm going to, first of all, you have to believe that like the mind is plastic and malleable and you can influence it. And it 100% is, because if you're resonating with sort of the, cynical view that I have sometimes, and how I say I have like an inner demon, if you resonate with that, then accept that some of that is your own doing. Like, I have these inner demons in me, but partially because of all the terrible stuff I put in my head over the years before I knew how corrosive that can be.
Yeah.
And so the first step is that awareness, then taking some action. And I think putting some good things in your head, putting, if you want to get ahead, you got to humble yourself to the fact that you need some help sometimes. And so go ahead and learn about NLP. Check out the Earl Nightingale, The Strangest Thing video. That's fascinating. Tony Robbins, Personal Power 2, so awesomely 90s, hilarious. It's awesome. You'll love it just for the nostalgia of it alone. But also, if you actually listen to it and do some of the exercises, it's deadly. It is deadly in its ability to powerfully shift you for the better. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be a billionaire or whatever, but who cares? Like, it's not all about that. It's about personal agency. It's about being the best you could be, helping your family. Like, we do talk about, ascending and achievements and all of that, but it doesn't have to be a monetary thing, right? It can be about building a tribe, creating something, even if it's just for yourself. Yeah. That's a super important thing. Getting that personal agency. So many people are just following the path that's laid out there and sort of sleepwalking through life. And I say that just because advice is autobiography, and I've said that before, and that's where I used to be, and it's much better uh, to just be like, okay, yes, I could do better. Yes, I could do better than this, and just go ahead and make those small incremental steps to get there. So yeah, so to answer your question, what do you start with? You start with everything, but cut the crap out first, then put the good programming in, and then catch yourself and catch others when you just be aware of it first when you hear things, and try to have compliment people, like we said before, right? If you can't,
Man.
you can't do it for yourself sometimes. This is, I don't know if we talked about the loving kindness meditation before, or maybe it's been a long time. So Jack Kornfield, he talks about the loving kindness meditation, and how, and what this is this is a meditation where first you think about yourself and you project love onto yourself. Then you project love onto your family and others around you. And then you project love onto those that you hate and that are your enemies.
Yeah.
Now, when this meditation was brought over to the United States, they found that they couldn't do it in this order because people have so much self-hatred. And so they had to first say, well, project it first onto your pet, maybe your spouse is too much, maybe your significant other is too much, maybe you've got too much conflict there. Maybe you need to project it onto your pet first, then your spouse, then your friends, maybe then yourself, and then an enemy. And that's very telling of where we find ourselves in the modern world. And so where this comes back to compliments is if you're having a hard time bringing around positive emotions and positive regard for yourself, and feeling positive emotions about some goal that you have that maybe you've just admitted to yourself, then compliment some people, because a lot of people find it easier. And even that is kind of a strange thing, but you get a high from it. It's strangely empowering. And it's a hell of a lot easier, I think, for many people to give a compliment to someone else than it is to give a compliment to themselves.
Yeah. I mean, do that. If I could recommend a place to start, it's compliment other people, because it changes your life experience in remarkably profound ways. And it brings more people into that passion bubble. So if you really look at, like, if you drew a Venn diagram of love and hate, there's a remarkable amount of overlay, because we don't love or hate people that we don't have any interaction with, right? Like, you don't just walk down the street and you're like, oh, there's a stranger, I hate that person.
Yeah.
But as you expand that bubble out, as you expand that your connections out into your community, you can absolutely expand a hate bubble, right? Like, it's not that hard to just start attributing things and expanding that. But it's also equally as easy to expand that love bubble, that you can just start to appreciate all of the people you interact with. The person that you were gonna write a negative Yelp review, you could just instead of getting on the phone, say something nice to them. And the likelihood is the bad experience that you're having in that moment is going to flip completely around, because all of the BS that they're dealing with in their head is going to likely evaporate, and they're going to think, wow, I just ran into a really nice, kind person. This is the thing that turned my day around. And then their whole day may be better. And I think that to go back to the exact place where we started, right? If you are about to take out your phone and write a negative Yelp review, try complimenting the person that you're going to say something negative about, and just observe how the experience changes right there, how your personal experience changes.
Absolutely. And a really, to even take it further, if someone is someone has to tell you something negative. Let's say whatever, you live in a neighborhood and some person from the city comes by and says you have a code violation.
Yep.
Instead of like bringing confrontation to that, bring empathy to them. Do you know how terrible it must be to have to go up to people and hand out tickets or warnings or nasty grams or whatever? And instead, if they like knock on your door or something, say, have positivity, say, oh, thanks, I didn't know that, whatever. And then say, hey, this must be really hard. You must get a lot of people who are throwing shade your way and who aren't that happy to see you. And just see how that changes this person. Just have some empathy for where people are at. And if you bring that kind of empathy to other people and that kind of understanding for where people are at and how difficult their life is, maybe you're going to have a little bit easier time with self-acceptance and bringing that around to yourself as a first step to seeing things in a more positive light.
Yeah. And the first step is like the hardest one, the most important one, and the one that changes and shifts everything forever. So just take that first step. Just be willing to take that first step and then see what happens. You can always stop being nice to people if you really want to do it. If you start being nice to people and it makes your life worse, you could always stop. It's not going to make your life worse, but if it does, just stop.
Yeah. Yeah, you can always be a tool later. That's fine. Go ahead. That's great.
Always.
That's amazing. It's not. Yeah. And like we've said before, I mean, this is not the easy path. This is the invisible path.
For sure.
And you've got to take a little action to go down that path. There are some obstacles in the way on that path, and take a little action and see what happens. People care about themselves oftentimes, or other people more than they care about themselves. They're more likely to care enough to give someone else some genuine advice than they would be to give themselves advice. So use this episode as a prompt, and if you made it this far, and just see what you can do to sort of gently brainwash yourself for the better. It is the first step, is the optimism. It's so important. And go ahead. You can be a pessimist later. That's fine if this doesn't work out, but try it for a while, and see if you can scrape that metaphysical cosmic dog crap off the bottom of your shoe. If you are looking around and seeing 1-star Yelp reviews everywhere, see if you can do that. We believe in you. We believe in you. You can do it. Yeah.
And your life, man, your life will get so dramatically better. It will you'll be amazed. You will be, if you, the next 5 places you go where you interact with a stranger, if you offer them a compliment, you will be amazed at the value you receive in that 2-second, 10-second interaction that you offered. Just try that and see what happens. That would be my first step. 5 strangers, give a compliment as you're checking out at the grocery store, see what happens.
You're so powerful. You should think of it as like a tip. You're tipping people. Just randomly tipping people. It's so powerful. You made their day sometimes, or at least their minute. But I mean, people think about that for a while, and it and it helps you too. You can look at it if you're like, well, this is bad, I'm too cynical for this. Fine. Look at it purely in a selfish way. You can just be a manipulative little demon. I'm going to compliment everybody and it'll be better for me. Fine. Start there if that's where you need to start. But
so
awesome.
as a really, I don't know if I may have told this story before, but I think it's a really interesting, it's a really interesting story and show how much impact you can have on someone's life. So I was in the Sprouts on Gilbert Road, Chandler, Arizona, place I went every single day when I lived there. And I'm checking out, and all of a sudden, the one of the managers gets right behind me, and she's like a foot away from me. And I'm like, kind of just standing in line thinking, well, that's a weird thing to happen. And then as we like move, she moves with me. And I'm like, okay, for sure she's about to accuse me of stealing something. And I check out, I turn around and she's like, hey, and we're just like, we're face to face now. And I'm like, hey, how's it going? And there's tears in her eyes. And she's like, I just want to give you a hug and let you know that tomorrow is going to be my last day at the store. And I just really appreciate you. And I I have no recollection of like the interactions that we've had, right? Like it's just me living my life. But the interactions that we had were so impactful that she became so emotional. She started crying and thanking me for living my life. Like I offered nothing except went to the store and bought food so that I could consume it. And I remember that moment is so like impactful in my brain into how you can make impressions on people's lives without putting forth any effort at all. And if we can make positive impacts in people's lives without putting forth effort, why wouldn't we do it?
That's amazing. That's incredible.
It was mind-boggling.
That's because you glow, Patrick. You glow. Well, your aura is massive. So yeah. And that positivity, that's amazing how it's stuck with you. And I mean, I do that. I try to do that with my kids too. Just have positivity and have a growth mindset. And when they run into problems, I mean, sometimes they're annoyed to hear it where I'm like, oh, here's the positive part of it. They're like, Dad. So I have to dial that back sometimes and wait. Sometimes you have to, like when you run into a problem, sometimes you have to wait for the demon to calm down, the cortisol and the stress hormones to wash over you. And then eventually when you get to a good place or with that other person,
we're back.
We're back. We froze up a little bit there. It's because your aura jammed the signal so much.
No, so I think that that's 100%. It's true. We should all do it. If we all did it, life would be so much better. And we won't all do it until we all start doing it. So let's start doing it and see what happens. Are there any bows that you want to put on today's conversation?
It's an incremental process. This does not happen overnight. If you need to shift, you want to shift your outlook, it does not happen overnight. But just bringing awareness to this does do it. And I think the forcing of it through complimenting other people is a brilliant thing. So I think to close, I don't know, if you have other questions, reach out.
Joel at primalcold.com or PB at vitality.com. Perfect ways to reach out to us. Happy episode 3.
Awesome, Patrick.
Go forth and compliment people.